Whoa. Super Bowl 59 was a total ass kicking by the Philadelphia Eagles as they thrashed and dominated the Kansas City Chiefs 40-22 in a game that wasn't even that close. There were two firsts in this game, which I'll discuss later, and I'm going to break down the performances of both quarterbacks. This is QB Unfiltered, my take, Super Bowl 59, Hurts and Mahomes, my reaction.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Okay, there were a few things that I knew 100% coming into this game. Number one, Kansas City defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo was going to design his defensive game plan to take running back Saquon Barkley out of Philly's offense and make quarterback Jalen Hurts beat them. And number two, Kansas City's offensive line was going to have to give Patrick Mahomes time to operate, run Kansas City's offense, and move the football. That was easier said than done. As far as number one, I was right. The Chiefs' defense surrounded Barkley the entire game with a really soft defensive line pass rush, where they just wanted to try to keep him in front of them and basically throw a net over him while they could commit their safeties to scream downhill and be sure tacklers, which they were the entire game. Barkley had just 57 yards on 25 carries. That's only 2.3 yards per carry. But his presence in this game and Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator for Philly, really played this smart with him. Barkley's presence opened up a lot of stuff that Hurts did offensively for the Eagles. And so to continue with number one, spoiler alert, Jalen Hurts was up to the task. Now, any good defensive coordinator is going to go into a game and take away what the offense does best. They're going to take away the offense's best weapon. And so it was pretty obvious going into this game what Spagnuolo was going to do. And the pressure and the onus was all going to be on Hurts as to whether or not he could make big downfield throws, which he was going to have to be able to do, and then make drive sustaining throws to move the sticks, which he also did. And the other thing Hurts did is he absolutely killed Kansas City with his legs. And Barkley played into this also. They used him as a decoy, an opportunity to pull linebackers out of the box and create seams for Hurts to run on QB scrambles or called QB trap draws or draw traps. They also ran a really unique RPO using Barkley on a swing with Hurts having the option on the RPO to run the QB run. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Now, as far as number two goes with Kansas City's offensive line, wow. They were overmatched, overpowered, and outplayed for 4 quarters. They got manhandled. Hurts was named the game's MVP, but Philly's defensive line really was the star of the game. So dominant were those 4 defensive linemen that the Eagles sacked Mahomes 6 times and didn't blitz once. Think about that. Okay, now before I dive into my analysis of both quarterbacks, let's talk about the 2 firsts in this game. Number one, for the first time in Super Bowl history, a sitting president was in attendance at the game. President Trump was in the house, the Superdome, down on the field before the game, and then up in the box for the game. And it was really cool. Number two, for the first time in Patrick Mahomes' illustrious NFL career, he looked shook and uncertain in a game. And more on that as we go. Okay, let's start with Patrick Mahomes. He was 21 for 32 for 257 yards, 3 touchdown passes, and 2 picks. Now, one of those picks was run back 50 yards for a touchdown in the first half. Mahomes also ran for 25 yards on 4 carries, which unfortunately was Kansas City's best rusher in the game. But don't be fooled by Mahomes' numbers. He threw for 224 yards and all 3 touchdown passes in the second half when Philly, whether they want to admit it or not, took their foot off the gas pedal. I'm pretty sure that subconsciously their players were starting to plan what they were going to do after the game, the after game celebration parties. So Mahomes did most of his damage statistically in that second half, which means in the first half, Patrick Mahomes' stat line was this: 6 for 14 for 33 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 2 picks. And if you saw the first offensive snap of the game for Kansas City, you witnessed Kansas City's only first down in the first half. Unbelievable. And that is how dominant Philly's defense was in this game. Okay, so with that being said, I watch these games with a notepad right next to my chair, and I wrote down about halfway through the first quarter, I wrote down number 15 looks off. He just looks off. He just didn't look like the Patrick Mahomes that we're used to seeing. Now, Philly's defensive line had a hell of a lot to do with this. Kansas City's offensive line had a hell of a lot to do with this. But Mahomes has been in situations before where he's faced pressure. He's faced a great pass rush. He hasn't had time to drop back, set up, scan the field, and throw in rhythm and tempo. There was just something different about him in this game. I don't know if it was too much self-pressure he put on himself. Remember now, you got Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes trying to be the only team to three-peat in a Super Bowl. Was there too much self-pressure put on them? I don't know. Was there something going on within the team in the locker room? I don't know. But Mahomes looked off, and tight end Travis Kelce, he also looked off. He looked slow and he looked disinterested. And we'll talk more about Kelce as we go, but I wrote that down early in the first quarter, and we didn't see Mahomes really get into the rhythm and start looking a little bit like Patrick Mahomes until the second half came around and the game was way over by then. But what was truly shocking to me was the complete look of shock on Mahomes' face. He was shook, and it's the first time that I've ever seen him behave like this. It's the first time I've ever seen that look on his face, that body language that he had. It was just really, really weird. He looked frantic in the pocket. Okay, now, if he doesn't drop back and is able to hit that last step in his drop and throw in rhythm and tempo, he will usually find a way to slide around the pocket, keep his composure, and deliver the ball downfield. That didn't happen in this game. It was like his feet were playing too fast for his mind, and his mind was playing slow, but he looked frantic in the pocket. He climbed into sacks, where he felt pressure coming from those defensive ends on the outside. And you got to know that if you've got those two defensive tackles that are kind of just hanging there on the line of scrimmage, soft rushing at times, that you can't climb 100 miles an hour up into the line of scrimmage because you're climbing right into a sack. And he did that a few times as well. The one thing that I did notice about him, there was a couple of things. His eyes came down to the rush a lot, and as a quarterback, that's the kiss of death. As soon as your eyes come down to the rush, it's over as far as any continuity in the rhythm and tempo of throwing the ball, or if the rhythm and tempo is jacked up because the pocket's breaking down. As soon as your eyes come down to what's going on with the pass rush, you lose sight of all your receivers and your running back downfield for potential dump offs or throwing the ball on the move, all of that stuff. And that was pretty obvious to me. The other thing was it looked like he was being either too cautious on attempted throws and dropbacks, where he just didn't throw the ball to guys that were open, or he didn't trust his eyes on what he was seeing. That's how shook he was. You know, there were routes that were being run by Kansas City's receivers, and Kelsey, when he did run full speed routes and when they weren't using him to pass block or to chip, which was a head scratcher for me a little bit, but Kelsey was running his little stick routes, his little option routes. Those two guys, Mahomes and Kelsey, have made a living throwing those routes. And Kelsey was open and Patrick wouldn't throw the ball. It was like he was being too cautious or he didn't trust his eyes. I don't know, but he just didn't look like he's looked his entire NFL career to me. He had throws where he was lobbing the ball, where he needed to stride, step into it and put some pace on it, lobbing throws. And there were some throws that he missed where he misfired because he was aiming the ball. So what I'm talking about with that, when you throw the ball as a quarterback, there's that natural throwing motion, right? Push the ball up and back, and then you come through and snap it off. That ball comes off of that index finger with that nice tight spin, that spiral, and that fluid throwing motion, and that ball goes to where you want it to go. When you start aiming throws, it's when you almost choke off the throw right at the end of it. Instead of following through and snapping that ball off your index finger, it's like you choke it off. You choke off the throw, and those balls tend to go down low on you. And Mahomes missed some balls in the first half that he threw low, and it just looked like to me that he was aiming the football. He just looked out of sorts, un-Patrick Mahomes-like. As always with quarterbacks, I'm always looking for the eyes. I'm always looking for facial expressions, and I'm always looking for body language, whether it's on the game field, right, or on the sideline. That tells me a lot about what's going on in a quarterback's head during the heat of the battle. Looking at Mahomes on Sunday, he just had this blank stare, and it was not the stare of focus. It was just a blank expression. Like no one was home, like he was shell-shocked. And to his credit, you know, like he always does, and this is one of the things that makes him such a great quarterback, he didn't let frustration get to him. He didn't stomp around. He didn't throw his helmet. He didn't yell and scream and cuss and pout and, you know, be demonstrative and any of that stuff. He stayed low-keyed, stayed within himself, but he just had this look on his face that wasn't good. Okay, so at halftime, I wrote this down. And again, I think Andy Reid knows a hell of a lot more about what he's doing than I do. But I wrote this down at halftime. More quick game, way more quick game, and run the damn ball. Okay, so just because you're in a hole point-wise, which they were at halftime, that doesn't mean you have to be chucking the ball downfield trying to score. As Tom Brady so brilliantly put it, you can't throw 24-point touchdown passes. What the quick game would do for Mahomes, besides getting him into rhythm and tempo, it would keep him on his feet, because Kansas City's offensive line just got hammered. And the two tackles, his two offensive tackles, had a rough day, right? The right tackle, I think his lack of foot speed, or where he would plant his feet in the ground and stop moving them and then start having to lean forward because he's getting beat. And as he's getting beat now, he's grabbing cloth and holding on. So he's getting called for holding penalties, or he's just getting beat. And then on the other side, the left tackle, man, he played high, straight up and down. And when you pass block standing up that tall, the defensive end is going to hit you in the mouth, bull rush your ass, and he's going to pile drive you, put you on roller skates, and drive you right back into the quarterback's lap. And on Mahomes' second pick that he threw, that's exactly what happened. His left tackle and the D end ended up hitting him as he did his stride step to throw the ball, and it bumped him off a little bit. And of course, the Philly linebacker made one hell of a pick laying out for that ball. But that was something that happened all day long with his left tackle. He stood straight up and down and got driven back into Mahomes. Okay, so then the second half starts, and on play one for the Chiefs offensively, they hand the ball off and run for 6 yards. They go tempo, they get back on the ball, quick game, boom, completion for a first down. Then they go 2 pass plays in a row where they've got intermediate routes where Mahomes has to hold the ball a little bit longer, 2 consecutive sacks, and we're back to doing the same old stuff. All right, as I always do with the quarterbacks, let's talk about Patrick Mahomes' best throws of the game. His best throw, in my opinion, was the back shoulder dime that he threw for his second touchdown pass. It was the fourth quarter on a 3rd and 6. Mahomes threw this little back shoulder throw where he GST'd, grab, stab, and throw, and he put that ball right where it needed to go, off to the left there, his outside receiver to the left, and put it only where his receiver could catch the ball for the touchdown. Okay. Then you've got the deep crosser that he threw on 1st and 10 in the third quarter. Kansas City was on their own 10-yard line, and he actually got enough time to throw now where he could step up in the pocket, and he cut loose and threw a laser on a deep crosser to Worthy for a 52-yard completion. Philly was playing cover 1 on the play, and Mahomes put it right on the money. Then you've got his first touchdown pass of the game and the first points of the night for Kansas City. I don't know what Kansas City was trying to run on this play. Mahomes on the run threw a seed in the end zone for a touchdown. He threw it to Worthy, who made a great catch in the end zone after running a really dog shit route, but he came back to the ball and made a great catch for a touchdown. That was a hell of a throw by Mahomes. And then in the fourth quarter on 2nd and 3, they had an unblocked linebacker, inside linebacker, coming on a wind sprint right at Mahomes, and he stands in there and delivers just a little 5-yard out route as he got absolutely blasted after he released the ball. And that's quarterback's job. Deliver the ball and take a hit. So you're standing there, right? And you know that this guy is unblocked and he's coming right at your grill and you're going to get blown up. You stand in there, you deliver the ball, which he did. He put it right on the money on that little out route and then got drilled. And that was a hell of a throw. Okay. To cap the night off for Mahomes, this nightmare night, was he got really, really lucky that he either didn't blow his elbow out or his throwing shoulder out in the fourth quarter. He dropped back to throw, and the defensive tackle to his left, over his left guard, beat the left guard and came around Mahomes to the backside. And as Patrick started to pull the ball back and come through, this guy reached his right arm around and stopped Mahomes' arm right there with a violent and sudden stop. That's how you seriously injure your arm. Carson Beck, the quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs, that's sort of exactly what happened to him this year. And he ended up blowing his shoulder out and having to go under the knife for surgery to repair that thing. Mahomes was really lucky on that play. The play was called a fumble, right, which Philly recovered. And to add insult to injury, the other defensive tackle over his right guard, who had great effort. Philly's D-line, man, they had great effort the entire game. Those guys played their asses off. This guy bull rushed the right guard, and as Mahomes got his arms stopped and fumbled the ball, this guy jacked Patrick up in the face mask and knocked the shit out of him. So, that was just a cherry on top for Philly's defense, and probably a pretty fitting way that on how the game was going for Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. But as he always does, Mahomes is a competitor, and he battled, and he just was un-Patrick Mahomes-like in this football game. And I think that was shocking to a lot of people. But again, hats off to Philly's defense. That front four, those guys are salty, and they're really aggressive, physical, fast, and good. Okay, now let's look at Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts. Now, It's been well documented with Hurts how he's overcome a lot of adversity in his career, both in college and in the NFL. You know, I could do just one show on Jalen Hurts and talk about the stuff he went through at the University of Alabama, transferring to Oklahoma, what he was drafted to do in the NFL, how he was perceived in the NFL when he showed up, just adversity and going through a lot of stuff in his career. And the really cool thing about what happened with Hurts in the Super Bowl Sunday and winning the MVP and hoisting that Super Bowl trophy was he has done what he's done for the Eagles with such character and class and composure, right? And he does everything right. He's a hell of a leader. He works his ass off. He competes his ass off on the field. He doesn't do stupid stuff. He doesn't hurt them offensively by making stupid plays. He handles himself off the field the way a professional athlete should do. He's the face or one of the faces of the Philadelphia Eagles football organization, and he represents them and the city the way it should be done. And you like to see good things happen to good dudes. And the other thing is Hurts has won everywhere he's been. He's won Alabama, Oklahoma, Philadelphia. Okay, for the game, Jalen Hurts was 17 for 22. That's 77% pass completion. He threw for 221 yards and 2 touchdown passes, and he did have that one pick. But he absolutely hurt Kansas City with his legs on QB scrambles, called QB draw traps, right? On RPOs with QB runs built into it. He ran for 72 yards and 1 touchdown on 11 carries. So getting back to what I talked about at the beginning of the show, Kansas City was going to take Barkley out and make Hurts try to beat them. He was going to have to make downfield throws, which he did, and then he was going to have to make conversion throws and move the sticks, which he did. And Hurts had ample time to throw. And this goes back to Spagnuolo and his game plan to take Barkley out. This gave Jalen Hurts all the time he needed to stand back there and survey the field and throw the ball with comfort, right? A lot of times in this game, Kansas City would rush 2 guys, the defensive ends, because the 2 interior guys would mush. And in fact, there was a couple of snaps where Barkley released on a leak route, and one of those interior D tackles ran with him in coverage. So because Kansas City was so concerned with Barkley, the pass rush was almost nil for Hurts. And, you know, you can ask any quarterback, that's the type of environment that you're digging all day long. You know, it was a really smart game of cat and mouse with offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, who, by the way, it looks like is going to be the next head coach for the New Orleans Saints. He's the offensive coordinator for Philly, or was the offensive coordinator for Philly. So it was a cat and mouse game between him and Spagnuolo. Moore would use Barkley as a decoy. So a lot of those QB runs where he was taken off downfield and it looked like the Red Sea was parting, every time Barkley would leak out one side or the other out of the backfield, one of those inside linebackers would go with him. And that just opened up all kinds of grass for Hurts to take off and run. Moore even got into the situation where he had a really unique RPO where he free released Barkley to the right on like a swing, and Hurts was reading that play side inside linebacker. If that inside linebacker widened with Barkley, Hurts takes off and runs, and there's nobody there in the box. If that linebacker hangs in the box, then Hurts just spits the ball out to Barkley. And the time that they did run this against Kansas City, that linebacker did stay in the box, and Hurts just flipped his hips and spit the ball out to Barkley, and he's off running. So really smart by Kellen Moore, knowing that Spagnuolo was going to come in and take Barkley out of the game, but they were going to use him to open up other parts of their offense, which they did brilliantly. Jalen Hurts' best throws of the game. His absolute best throw was in the second quarter, 3rd and 7. It was a 23-yard back shoulder vertical he threw to the right side, a real dime to receiver Brown, took a 3-step drop and put the ball right on the money. You know, back shoulder throws, those are tough throws for quarterbacks. You've got a really small surface area to put that ball on. If you miss inside, bad things are going to happen, right? That ball's either batted down or it's picked. If you miss outside too far, it's incomplete and out of bounds. You got to put it right on that outside shoulder. And Hurts did exactly that. That was his best throw of the game. Then in the first quarter, he had a 28-yard throw on a vertical route, which was caught and down on the 1-yard line to Dotson. It set up Philly's first touchdown on the tush push. Now on that vertical route, Hurts had some poor weight distribution as far as I'm concerned, how I would coach it. He tilted that front shoulder up on his drop. That back shoulder was down, which meant when he got to the end of his drop, his weight was back on his back foot, but he was able to stride and get the ball out on time and throw an absolute perfect ball. Now on this play, running back Barkley, again, doing the little things to help his team win. He had a great blitz pickup block on a blitzing inside linebacker, which gave Hurts the room to throw that ball. Okay, and then other great throws in the second quarter, just a little 7-yard out route to Goddard. The left offensive guard for Philly had a mental bust. He went the wrong way on the pass protection, and so his guy, the defensive lineman, is unblocked and has an absolute wind sprint at Hurts. Same situation that Mahomes went through earlier that we talked about. You got a defensive guy barreling in on you, and you know you're going to get lit up. And you stand in there and deliver the ball. That's your job. And Hurts did that and delivered a dime for a 7-yard completion. And then in the third quarter, the seam route from 46 yards out, right? He play faked it, dropped, hitched up, and delivered the ball through a great 3. So he put air underneath it, nice and soft, and dropped it right in the pocket. Wide receiver Smith caught the touchdown. And the beautiful thing about this play is, as a receiver coach, this is what you want to teach your guys to do, and not a lot of receiver coaches do it. Smith was getting pressed man, and what do most guys do when they run verticals against man press? They outside release. And that's exactly what the corner wants you to do. And Smith took an inside release. Now, as soon as you inside release against man press, that DB is going, oh shit, because now you can run shallow cross, you can run a deep cross, you can run a dig, you can run anything where he may have to chase your butt all the way across the field. So now you're putting doubt into his mind as opposed to outside releasing, which is where he wants you to go. And he just opens his hips and runs with you with a lot of confidence and tries to melt you into the sideline and use it as another defender. So Smith made a great inside release, beat him, boom. He's off and running, and Hurts dropped it right in the bucket. Okay, so a few things stood out in this game to me about Jalen Hurts. Number one, he's deceptively fast. When he ran, he outran some dudes in the secondary. He can pick them up and put them down, and he's a big dude, you know, he can run. He did a really nice job of what I call controlled shuffle all day long. And what that is you get to the end of your drop and you're not able to throw the ball in rhythm, and that pocket may start to be collapsing a little bit on you, and you've got to come to your second or third read. You start working back away from the line of scrimmage in a slow shuffle, right? And when you do that, you maintain that buffer between you and your offensive linemen who are losing ground when they're pass blocking. And you keep your eyes downfield on your reads and keys, and just a nice controlled shuffle, shoulders level. You're ready to plant that back foot, stride, and throw at a second's notice. He did that a lot in this game. Really good mechanics by him. And then, I've said this before, he plays really calm really controlled, and he just does his job with a quiet confidence. Now, you wouldn't know how he was playing, whether the Eagles were up or down, by his facial expressions on the sideline or on the field during the game. He had the same expression. It was just calm, stoic, do your job, but with a quiet confidence that you know his teammates could feel and feed off of. Okay, so we're going to see for Kansas City if this is just a speed bump and they're going to be back. They got to shore up the offensive line next year. And, for a team that has one of the greatest quarterbacks to play in the NFL, and they're going to throw the ball, it starts and ends with the 5 dudes up front pass blocking. And they just didn't get it done Sunday in the Super Bowl. It's also going to be interesting to see if Travis Kelce, what he's going to do. I think, this is just my opinion, I think that he may have some other priorities going on with him, like focusing on what he's going to do with his career after football. He just didn't look the same in this game. Maybe it's because it was in New Orleans, If you've been to New Orleans and down on Bourbon Street, you know what I'm talking about. I don't know. He just didn't look like Travis Kelce. Kansas City will be back. Okay. We'll see, but I think they'll be back. Now, as far as the Eagles go, they're going to need to find a really quality offensive coordinator to take Kellen Moore's spot. But they're going to be in great shape with Fangio on the defensive side. And I'll tell you what was really obvious, it really looks like their players are hungry. Those guys are hungry, much like Kansas City was a few years back. It is hard to maintain excellence over a year after year after year after year period. It just is. Because that look in the player's eyes just starts to change a little bit the longer you go. And that's a fact in football. That's a fact. Okay, guys. So as always, if you enjoy my take on quarterbacks, on offensive play, the passing game, then hit that like button and continue to subscribe to the channel QB Unfiltered. I really appreciate your support. Drop me a comment. Give me your thoughts on the Super Bowl. Give me your thoughts on Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, and be interested to see what you guys think about this. Okay, this is QB Unfiltered. And remember, always throw the ball short to guys who can score. See ya.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.